The champagne cork popped, echoing like a gunshot in the cavernous dining hall. Laughter spilled out, too loud, too forced, while crystal glasses clinked together in a hollow symphony. At that very moment, Naomi understood that her marriage was nothing more than an ornate coffin, and tonight was its burial. Across the long marble table, her husband Richard, the billionaire king of luxury real estate, raised a glass to his mistress, a young white woman barely older than their son. In her arms was a newborn, wrapped in silk blankets, as if even its cries deserved a fortune. Naomi did not raise her glass. She kept her hands folded on her lap, her skin dark against the pale ivory fabric of her dress, her diamond ring suddenly heavy with irony. She had worn that ring through 25 years of loyalty, betrayal, and silence. Tonight, silence was no longer her ally. Their son, Elijah, sat stiffly 2 chairs away. His curls were unkempt, his eyes downcast, fingers tapping nervously against the linen tablecloth. He wasn't looking at the baby. He wasn't looking at the mistress. He was looking at his mother, as if silently asking, "Are we going to survive this?" Naomi caught his glance and gave the faintest nod. Survival had always been her art. Richard, with his booming laugh and politician's smile, slid an arm around the mistress's shoulders as though they were newlyweds. "To new beginnings," he declared, his baritone filling every corner of the room. The staff applauded awkwardly, trained loyalty masking unease. Naomi pressed her lips together, then lowered her gaze to the papers folded neatly in her purse. Tomorrow they would be on his desk. Divorce was no longer a threat, no longer a whispered possibility. It was her liberation. But as the glasses were raised and the toasts multiplied, Naomi's thoughts were not only of herself. They were of Elijah. He was 16, fragile yet fierce, carrying burdens a boy should never carry. He had watched his mother shrink in silence, his father parade infidelities, and now he was about to carry a secret that could shatter or save them all. Naomi's eyes flickered toward the far edge of the room. A figure lingered half-hidden near the doorway. Daniel, Elijah's closest friend. Slim, with delicate features and a quiet presence, Daniel looked out of place among the opulence. His gaze never left Elijah. There was a softness in it, a tenderness too pure for this poisoned atmosphere. Naomi saw it, though Richard never would. A mother knows. Elijah's secret was written in the way his shoulders dropped when Daniel entered the room, in the way his fingers relaxed as if finding their rhythm again. And Naomi, who had lost so much, would not let her son lose himself. Still, she knew what was coming. Richard had always despised difference. Race was already a wound between them, her blackness tolerated only because it burnished his image of progress and power. Love for Richard was always conditional. Elijah would not be forgiven for being gay. And Naomi feared that Richard's cruelty would not stop at rejection. It would destroy Elijah, crush him beneath the same weight that had pressed on her for years. But Naomi was not Elijah. Elijah was not Naomi. The boy had a fire she had long buried. And tonight, with a baby being celebrated while his mother's heart broke, Elijah's fire was about to ignite. The dinner dragged on. Words floated above the table like daggers coated in honey. Naomi excused herself early, feigning a headache, retreating to the balcony. The autumn air was sharp, biting, alive with the sound of leaves scattering across stone. She gripped the railing, staring out at the manicured gardens that stretched endlessly, every hedge sculpted into perfection. Her life had been sculpted too into someone else's design. Behind her, footsteps approached. "Mom!" Elijah's voice wavered, but it carried something raw. Naomi turned. His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. She brushed a curl from his forehead, her own throat tightening. "You don't have to," she said simply. Elijah blinked, startled. For the first time, he saw not just his mother, but an ally. Naomi exhaled, steadying herself. "You're carrying something, Elijah. You don't need to say it." "I know." His lips parted, trembling. "Daniel, he's not just my friend." Naomi smiled, soft and sad. "I know." Elijah's relief was palpable. a flood washing over him. But fear quickly followed. Dad will kill me. Naomi shook her head. No, Elijah. He can't kill what you are. And you are love. That is something he'll never understand. The door creaked open again, and Daniel appeared, hesitant. His eyes darted to Naomi, unsure if he should leave. She extended a hand, beckoning him closer. Daniel's face softened with gratitude as he stepped into the night air. For a moment, the three of them stood together on the balcony. The betrayed wife, the closeted son, the boy whose love dared to exist. It was fragile, fleeting, yet profoundly real. Inside, laughter erupted once more. The sound was distant, irrelevant. The real story was unfolding here, in whispers under the night sky. Elijah looked between them, his breath uneven. I want to tell him, he said suddenly, voice trembling but resolute. Naomi froze. Tonight. He's celebrating a child that isn't even yours, Mom. He's parading her like a trophy. And I'm supposed to sit there, invisible, pretending I don't exist. I won't. I can't. Daniel touched his arm gently. Elijah, it's dangerous. Elijah turned to him, eyes blazing. So what if it is? I'm tired of being afraid. Naomi's chest ached with both terror and pride. Her son's courage was a mirror held to her own silence, and it hurt. If you do this, she whispered, you can't take it back. The world will see you, and it won't always be kind. Elijah straightened, his jaw tight. Then let them see me. The determination in his voice was unshakable. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. The boy was already a man in ways she had never wished for him. Then we stand with you, she said. Daniel's hand slid into Elijah's, tentative yet unbreakable. Naomi watched their fingers intertwine and felt a spark of something she had not felt in years. Hope. Elijah turned back toward the dining hall, where Richard's booming laugh was now joined by a toast to legacy. Naomi knew what legacy meant to Richard. Power, wealth, white blood. Tonight, Elijah would redefine it. The moment he pushed open the doors, silence fell like a curtain. Every head turned. Richard, irritated by the interruption, scowled. Elijah, sit down. We're celebrating. Elijah did not move to his chair. He stood tall, shoulders squared, Daniel's hand still in his. His voice, though shaky, carried across the room. If you're celebrating family, then celebrate all of it. Because this is mine. Gasps rippled through the room. Richard's face darkened, thunderclouds gathering. The mistress shifted uncomfortably, clutching the baby tighter. Elijah squeezed Daniel's hand, grounding himself. I'm gay, he declared, louder this time, as though carving the words into the marble walls. And Daniel is the person I love. For a long, excruciating second, no one breathed. Then Richard exploded. What the hell did you just say? His voice cracked like a whip. Naomi rose from her seat, calm but unyielding. He said the truth. Richard's glare darted between them, disbelief curdling into rage. Not in my house, he spat. Elijah lifted his chin. Then maybe it isn't my house. Those words sliced through the air sharper than any blade. Naomi's heart swelled with fear and pride simultaneously. She stepped beside her son, placing a hand on his shoulder. It never was, Richard. It was always yours. But tonight, it becomes ours. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. The guests, caught between fascination and horror, whispered furiously. Richard's empire was built on control, but in this moment, control was slipping. Elijah's hand in Daniel's was more dangerous to him than any lawsuit, any scandal. It was truth, and truth was uncontrollable. Richard's fist slammed against the table, rattling cutlery. You think you can embarrass me? In front of everyone? You're nothing, Elijah. Nothing without my name. Elijah's voice cracked, but he didn't falter. Then I'll build my own. Naomi watched, tears burning in her eyes. Her son, once small enough to curl against her chest, was now standing against a giant. And for the first time, Richard looked small. Very small. Naomi opened her purse. With slow, deliberate grace, she placed the divorce papers on the table. You're not the only one starting over, Richard. Silence again, thicker this time like fog. The baby whimpered in the mistress's arms, a fragile sound amid the storm. Naomi straightened, her dignity a shield. You can keep your empire, your image, your lies, but you cannot keep us. The papers lay on the table like a weapon, silent but lethal. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their velvet chairs, their jewels glinting under the chandelier's light as whispers rippled like wildfire. Richard's hand hovered above the divorce papers, trembling with fury, but he did not touch them. To acknowledge them was to acknowledge defeat. His gaze darted to Naomi, who stood tall beside her son, her dark skin glowing under the harsh light, her eyes burning with defiance. For the first time in their 25-year marriage, Richard saw her not as a possession or an ornament but as an adversary he could not control. Elijah's hand tightened in Daniel's, and though his legs felt like stone, he refused to sit down. The silence grew unbearable, and finally, Richard broke it. You ungrateful, he stopped himself, his voice cracking. He straightened, adopting the mask of the powerful man who never faltered. Naomi, do you realize what you're doing? You're destroying everything we built. Naomi's lips curved into the faintest smile. No, Richard. You destroyed it the moment you chose to build it without love. The words cut sharper than any blade, and Richard flinched. Around them, the guests exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others eager for scandal. The mistress, pale and nervous, tried to fade into the background, clutching the infant as if the baby could shield her from the storm. Elijah's voice, quiet but firm, followed his mother's. I'm done hiding. If you can't accept me, then that's your loss. But you won't erase me. Richard's jaw tightened, the vein in his temple pulsing. He looked at Daniel with disgust. And you? He spat, his tone dripping with venom. This is what you bring into my house? A parasite feeding on my son's weakness. Daniel's face reddened, but he didn't let go of Elijah's hand. He opened his mouth to speak, but Elijah stepped forward, shielding him. Don't you dare, Elijah hissed, surprising even himself with the ferocity in his voice. Don't you dare talk to him like that. Daniel is not my weakness, my strength. Naomi's eyes filled with tears, pride swelling within her chest. For years she had prayed that her son wouldn't inherit her silence, and here he was, roaring in the face of power. Richard laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound. Strength? Do you think anyone will respect you now? A black boy flaunting his little secret, holding hands with someone who doesn't even belong here. He sneered at Daniel, his words laced with venom. You'll be laughed out of every room, Elijah. Your name will be tarnished. Elijah met his father's gaze, his voice steady. Then let it be tarnished, because I'd rather live in truth than choke on your lies. The words stunned the room into silence. Naomi reached for her son's hand, and together they formed an unbreakable chain, with Daniel's hand completing the circle. It was a small gesture, but in that mansion dripping with wealth and falsehood, it was the most powerful act of rebellion. Richard's face reddened, his composure fracturing. He looked around at the guests, realizing too late that the scandal was no longer containable. Whispers had turned into sharp murmurs, cell phones discreetly raised to capture the drama. The empire he had built on image and control was crumbling in real time, and he could do nothing to stop it. Naomi straightened her shoulders. I'll have my lawyer contact yours in the morning, she said, her voice calm, steady. As for Elijah, he is not your legacy to control. He is his own. She turned then, her hand guiding Elijah toward the door. Daniel followed, his grip still firm. Together, they walked away from the table, leaving behind the empire of deceit. Behind them, Richard's voice echoed, guttural and broken. You'll regret this, both of you. But Naomi didn't turn back. For once, she didn't need to. Elijah's breath shook as they reached the grand staircase. He had expected freedom to feel like flying. Instead, it felt like falling, every step heavier than the last. But Daniel's hand was still in his, grounding him, tethering him to something real. Naomi placed a hand on his shoulder as they descended the stairs. "You were brave," she whispered. Elijah shook his head. "I was terrified." "That's what bravery is," she said softly. The car ride home was quiet, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. Naomi sat in the front, staring out into the night, her mind already calculating the battles to come: lawyers, media, reputation. She knew Richard would fight dirty, smear her, smear Elijah. But beneath the fear, she felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, she had chosen herself. Elijah sat in the back with Daniel, their hands still intertwined. He leaned his head against the cool glass, exhaustion seeping into his bones. Daniel turned toward him, voice gentle. "You okay?" Elijah nodded faintly. "I don't know what's going to happen." "Whatever it is," Daniel said, squeezing his hand, "we'll face it together." Elijah closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. Together. It was a word that felt like home. When they reached Naomi's townhouse, a modest yet elegant space she had maintained quietly for years, as her sanctuary, they stepped into the warmth of a different world. No chandeliers, no marble floors, no suffocating pretense. Just bookshelves lined with stories, soft rugs, and the scent of jasmine candles. Naomi poured herself a glass of wine, her hands finally steady. Elijah collapsed onto the couch, Daniel beside him. For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, no, it was healing. Finally, Naomi broke it. "Richard will come after us," she said quietly. Elijah tensed, but Naomi's eyes met his with calm assurance. "But he can't touch who we are. And tonight you showed him that." Elijah swallowed hard, his throat tight. Do you hate me? For telling him like that?" Naomi's heart cracked at the question. She crossed the room, kneeling in front of him, taking his hands in hers. "Elijah, I could never hate you. You gave me the strength I thought I'd lost. You reminded me what it means to fight for love." His eyes brimmed with tears, and he nodded, unable to speak. Daniel, sitting close, brushed his thumb gently over Elijah's knuckles, silent but steady. Naomi looked at Daniel then, really looked. "You care for him," she said softly. Daniel's eyes met hers, vulnerable but resolute. "More than anything." Naomi nodded, her chest tightening with both fear and relief. "Then don't let him go, no matter what comes." Daniel's eyes glistened, and he squeezed Elijah's hand. Elijah leaned against him, the weight of the night finally breaking, and tears spilled silently down his cheeks. Naomi placed a gentle hand on her son's curls, whispering, "You're free now. Don't waste it." In the days that followed, the storm arrived just as Naomi had predicted. Headlines blazed across every news outlet. Billionaire heir comes out during family celebration. Wife files for divorce. Paparazzi swarmed the townhouse. Reporters camped outside, microphones ready to catch any slip. Social media erupted with debates, some praising Elijah's courage, others mocking, others cruel. Richard went on the offensive, releasing carefully crafted statements through his publicists. He painted Naomi as unstable, manipulative, ungrateful. He painted Elijah as confused, corrupted by bad influences. He painted Daniel as a gold digger. Naomi read the articles in silence, sipping her tea, her face unreadable. Elijah raged, pacing the living room, fists clenched. "He's lying about us. About Daniel." Daniel sat quietly on the couch, shoulders hunched, used to the sting of slander. "He's scared," Naomi said calmly. "Scared of losing control. That's why he's lashing out." Elijah turned to her, his eyes blazing. "But people believe him." Naomi placed her cup down, her gaze steady. "Then we show them the truth." Elijah frowned. "How?" Naomi leaned forward. "By living it. By not hiding. By showing the world that love isn't shameful." Elijah hesitated, his mind flashing images of cruel comments online, the venom in his father's voice. But then he looked at Daniel, quiet, steadfast Daniel, and felt the knot in his chest loosen. Maybe his mother was right. Maybe the only way forward was through the fire. That night, as the cameras flashed outside, Elijah made a decision. He opened his laptop, heart pounding, fingers trembling. But she also knew that something had shifted irrevocably. The silence that had strangled their lives was broken. And once broken, it could never return. Elijah closed his laptop, exhaling shakily. Daniel slipped an arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. Naomi raised her glass quietly, a toast to no one and everyone. To truth, she whispered. In that modest townhouse, amid the chaos of a crumbling empire, something new was being built. Not on wealth, not on image, but on love. The knock on the door came just after dawn. Naomi, who had barely slept, rose from the couch where she dozed with a blanket around her shoulders. She knew before opening it who it would be. Outside stood a man in a tailored suit, his expression stiff, his hand clutching a leather briefcase. Behind him, two reporters shouted questions through the morning air. Mrs. Carter, is it true you filed for divorce? Did your son ruin the family name? Naomi's jaw tightened, but she ignored them. The lawyer handed her a thick envelope. Mr. Carter's response, he said flatly, before turning and retreating into the waiting black car. Naomi shut the door and leaned against it, the envelope heavy in her hands. Elijah stirred awake, hair tousled, Daniel still curled beside him on the couch. What's that? He asked groggily. Naomi hesitated, then handed it to him. Your father's opening move. Elijah tore it open, his eyes scanning the pages. With each line, his face darkened. She's suing you? For defamation. Naomi's lips thinned. Of course. He wants to scare me into silence. Elijah flipped through more pages, his hands shaking. And he's filing for full custody of me. On what grounds? That you're unfit? That's insane. Naomi's heart ached as she pulled the papers from his trembling hands. It's a tactic, Elijah. He knows you're nearly 17. He can't control you legally much longer. But he can drag us through the mud until we're too exhausted to fight. Elijah buried his face in his hands, his breath ragged. Daniel rubbed his back gently, whispering, He can't take you away. Not now. Not after everything. Naomi exhaled slowly. He's not taking you. He's trying to take your voice. But we won't let him. The next week became a whirlwind of lawyers' meetings, flashing cameras, and endless scrutiny. Naomi's townhouse, once a quiet refuge, became the epicenter of a media storm. Protesters gathered outside, some holding signs of support, others wielding hateful slogans. Elijah avoided the windows, but he could hear their chants at night, drilling into his skull. At school, things were worse. Whispers followed him down the hall. Friends avoided him, unsure of what to say. Some classmates sneered openly, mocking him with cruel jokes. Elijah clenched his fists but kept walking, Daniel always by his side. It was Daniel who bore the brunt of its slurs carved into his locker, books knocked from his hands. But he never once let go of Elijah's hand in the hallways. Naomi watched her son suffer, her own fury growing. Richard's empire had always been ruthless in business. Now he was turning that ruthlessness on his own family. She sat with her lawyer one evening, exhaustion etched into her face. He'll settle eventually, the lawyer said. The public pressure is mounting against him. Naomi shook her head. You don't know Richard. He doesn't stop until he breaks what he can't control. Meanwhile, Elijah's post continued to spread. Hashtags with his name trended. LGBTQ+ organizations reached out with messages of solidarity. Activists invited him to speak. He declined them all, too overwhelmed, too raw. I don't want to be a symbol, he confessed one night, curled against Daniel on the couch. I just want to live. Daniel kissed his forehead gently. Sometimes living is the bravest symbol of all. Naomi overheard and felt a surge of gratitude toward the boy who gave her son strength. Still, she worried. Each headline seemed sharper, each attack more personal. Richard's allies painted Elijah as immature, Naomi as bitter, Daniel as opportunistic. And though the support was vast, the hate was venomous. Late one night, Elijah sat scrolling through comments on his phone, tears brimming. "Look at this," Daniel Thierry saying, "I'm just a spoiled brat rebelling for attention. They're saying you're only with me for money we don't even have." Daniel gently took the phone from his hand. "Stop reading them." "But what if they're right?" Elijah's voice cracked. "What if I ruined everything for you, for Mom?" Naomi crossed the room swiftly, kneeling before him. She took his face in her hands, forcing his eyes to meet hers. "Elijah Carter, listen to me. You did not ruin anything. You saved us. You saved me from wasting another decade in chains. Don't let their lies become your truth." Elijah's tears spilled over, and he collapsed against her. Naomi held him tightly, rocking him like she had when he was a child. "You're not alone," she whispered. "Never alone." Days turned into weeks. Richard escalated, releasing staged photos of himself with the mistress and baby, painting a picture of blissful domestic life. Headlines contrasted the images with shots of Naomi looking weary, Elijah with Daniel, often captioned with cruelty. But beneath the surface, cracks began to show. Former employees leaked stories of Richard's affairs, his temper, his ruthless deals. Journalists dug deeper. The empire he had fortified with image and fear began to tremble. Naomi didn't celebrate, it was too early, but she saw the tide shifting. Then came the night Elijah refused to hide any longer. A local LGBTQ+ center invited him to speak at a fundraiser. Naomi worried, but Elijah's determination was unshakable. "If I stay silent, Dad wins. If I speak, maybe someone like me won't feel so alone." Daniel squeezed his hand. "We'll stand with you." The night of the event, the hall buzzed with anticipation. Cameras lined the back, supporters filled the seats, rainbow flags draped across the stage. Elijah stepped up to the microphone, heart hammering. His mother sat in the front row, Daniel beside her, their faces glowing with pride. Elijah's voice shook at first, but as he spoke, strength poured into him. "A few weeks ago, I thought my world had ended. My father rejected me. My family was torn apart. But tonight, looking at all of you, I realized something. Family isn't about blood or money or the empire someone builds. It's about love. And love is not a weakness, it's the only strength that matters." The crowd erupted in applause. Elijah's chest heaved, tears glistening in his eyes. Daniel joined him on stage, wrapping an arm around him. Naomi rose too, stepping into the light, her hand resting proudly on her son's shoulder. Cameras flashed, capturing the image, the betrayed wife, the gay son, the steadfast boyfriend. A new legacy, built not on wealth, but on truth. That night, social media exploded again, but this time the narrative shifted. Photos of the Carters at the fundraiser went viral, accompanied by captions of hope and resilience. Support grew louder, drowning out the hate. Richard raged, smashing glasses in his penthouse, but the tide was unstoppable. Elijah returned home exhausted but radiant. He curled up with Daniel in the quiet townhouse, whispering, "For once, I'm not afraid." Naomi watched them, her heart full. She knew battles remained: courts, custody, media, but the war for their dignity had already been won. The next morning, Naomi woke to her phone buzzing endlessly. Dozens of messages, hundreds of notifications. She scrolled, stunned. Celebrities had shared Elijah's speech. Activists hailed him as a voice for the next generation. Donations to the LGBTQ+ center skyrocketed. Elijah's words had traveled farther than she'd imagined. Elijah himself stumbled into the kitchen, hair wild, eyes bleary. "Why is my phone exploding?" he muttered. Naomi handed it to him. His eyes widened as he read message after message of love and support from around the world. Tears filled his eyes. "Mom, they heard me." Naomi hugged him, laughter and tears mingling. "Yes, baby. They did." Daniel walked in, rubbing his eyes, and Elijah pulled him into a fierce embrace. "We're not alone," he whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "We never were." Outside, the protesters were gone. In their place stood a small group holding signs of support. The tide had turned. Richard's empire would keep fighting, but the story had changed forever. And in a modest townhouse filled with love, Naomi, Elijah, and Daniel realized that no matter what storms came, they had already won the most important battle, the right to exist as they were. The final battle did not come with fists or screams. It came in courtrooms under fluorescent lights, where lawyers sparred with words sharp as knives, and the weight of truth was measured against lies polished with money. Naomi sat in the front row, dignified in a navy suit, her head held high despite the fatigue that tugged at her bones. Elijah sat beside her, Daniel's hand resting discreetly over his. Cameras flashed outside, but inside the courthouse, silence reigned. Richard entered with his entourage of lawyers, the young mistress trailing behind, the infant cradled in her arms. His presence still commanded attention, but the cracks in his armor were visible. His jaw was tight, his eyes bloodshot, his shoulders burdened by the empire he could no longer fully control. The trial stretched for weeks. Richard's lawyers painted Naomi as bitter, unstable, manipulating her son to tarnish Richard's name. They painted Elijah as confused, led astray by an opportunistic boyfriend. Naomi's lawyers countered with testimonies from former staff who described Richard's affairs, his rages, his obsession with image. They presented Elijah's own words, his speech at the LGBTQ+ center, his viral post that had touched millions. Truth and lies collided daily, the courtroom becoming a stage where the world watched the unraveling of a billionaire's family. Through it all, Naomi remained steady. She refused to let Richard see her falter. Elijah, though shaken by the cruel words thrown at him, refused to shrink. Daniel never left his side, his quiet presence an anchor in the storm. Then came the day Elijah was called to the stand. The courtroom hushed as he approached, his curls falling over his forehead, his palms sweaty. Naomi's heart clenched, but when Elijah looked back at her, she nodded, pouring all her strength into him. The lawyer began gently. "Elijah, can you tell the court what happened the night of your father's celebration?" Elijah's voice wavered at first, but grew steadier as he spoke. He described the baby, the mistress, the toasts, and then the moment he stood up, holding Daniel's hand, telling the truth. "Why did you choose that moment?" the lawyer asked. Elijah swallowed hard. "Because I was tired of being invisible. Because I wanted my father to see Menet the son he wanted. But the son I am." The opposing lawyer rose, sharp as a blade. "Elijah, you're 16. Don't you think you're too young to know such things about yourself? Isn't it possible you're confused?" Elijah met his gaze steady. "I know who I am, and I'm not confused. I'm in love. That's not confusion, it's clarity." Murmurs rippled through the room. The lawyer pressed on. "And this, Daniel, isn't it true he comes from a working-class family? That he might have reasons to use you?" Elijah's jaw tightened. "Daniel hasn't taken a single thing from me. He's given me strength when my own father tried to take it away." Daniel's eyes shone with tears from the gallery. Naomi's chest swelled with pride and ache. The lawyer scoffed. "So you expect us to believe this? Teenage romance is worth shattering your family over?" Elijah's voice rose, clear and unyielding. "It didn't shatter my family. My father did that. Love didn't break us, Lees did." The courtroom erupted in whispers, some gasps, some applause quickly hushed by the judge. Richard's face turned crimson, fury barely contained. But for the first time, Naomi saw fear in his eyes, not fear of losing money, but fear of losing control completely. After Elijah stepped down, Naomi took the stand. She told her story without venom, without theatrics, just truth. 25 years of silence, of betrayal endured, of dignity swallowed. She spoke of her love for Elijah, her refusal to let him suffer in silence as she had. "I stayed quiet for too long," she said softly, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "But my son's courage reminded me that silence is its own kind of prison. I will not return to it." When she stepped down, the judge's eyes lingered on her with something like respect. The verdict came weeks later. Naomi was granted her divorce. Richard's claims of defamation dismissed. Custody was ruled in her favor, recognizing Elijah's near adulthood and his clear voice in choosing his home. Richard's empire remained intact, but tarnished, his public image fractured beyond repair. Naomi left the courthouse with Elijah and Daniel at her side, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she placed her hand on her son's shoulder, her smile soft but unbreakable. That evening, they returned to the townhouse. The air felt lighter, freer, as if the walls themselves exhaled. Naomi cooked dinner, something simple, warm, filling. They ate together at the small wooden table. No chandeliers, no crystal, no pretense. Just family. After dinner, Elijah sat with Daniel on the balcony, the city lights glowing in the distance. He leaned against him, exhaustion and relief mingling in his chest. "We made it," Elijah whispered. Daniel kissed his temple gently. "You made it, and I'm so proud of you." Elijah smiled, tears brimming. "I couldn't have done it without you." Daniel shook his head softly. "You did it because it was who you are. Brave. Real." Inside, Naomi watched them through the glass door, her heart aching with a mixture of grief and joy. She had lost a marriage, a world she once believed in. But she had gained something greater. Her son's freedom, her own dignity, the fragile beginnings of a new legacy. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle. The media moved on to other scandals. Richard retreated from the spotlight, his mistress hidden away, his empire quietly bleeding. Naomi focused on rebuilding her career, her peace, her home. Elijah returned to school, still facing whispers, but walking taller. Some classmates still sneered, but others reached out quietly, thanking him, confiding in him. He realized then that his voice had opened doors for others, and though he had never sought to be a symbol, he had become one. Daniel remained his constant studying beside him, walking hand in hand through halls, sitting with him under the stars when the weight of it all grew too heavy. Their love, though young, burned steady, a flame refusing to be snuffed out. One evening, months later, Naomi hosted a small gathering at the townhouse. Close friends, allies, neighbors who had stood by them. There was laughter, music, warmth. Elijah and Daniel played cards with friends in the corner, their laughter ringing through the room. Naomi watched them, a glass of wine in her hand, and felt peace she hadn't known in years. A guest leaned over, smiling. "You must be so proud." Naomi's eyes lingered on Elijah, his head thrown back in laughter, Daniel's hand brushing his. "I am," she said simply. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the townhouse quiet again, Elijah approached his mother on the balcony. He slipped his hand into hers, leaning his head on her shoulder like he had as a child. "Do you think it's over?" he asked softly. Naomi looked out at the city, the lights stretching endlessly. "No, battles like this are never over. The world will always have voices that try to silence us. But we don't have to listen." Elijah was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I'm glad we're free." Naomi kissed the top of his curls. "Me too, baby. Me too." Inside, Daniel waited, smiling softly at them through the glass. Elijah pulled away gently, slipping back into Daniel's arms, their fingers entwined. Naomi watched, her heart swelling. The world might never be perfect. Prejudice might never disappear. But in the small corner of it, love had rewritten the rules. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.